The Bellevue Hotel stood as a monument to old-world elegance in the heart of the city, its marble columns gleaming under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers that had witnessed decades of secrets, celebrations, and clandestine meetings. Tonight, the Grand Ballroom hosted the annual Metropolitan Arts Foundation Charity Gala, an event that drew the city's elite like moths to a flame. Among the sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, Elena Moretti moved with practiced grace, her emerald dress complementing her olive skin and dark hair that cascaded in loose waves down her back. She had spent an hour getting ready, not out of vanity but out of necessity. Tonight represented freedom. Tonight was supposed to be the beginning of her new life. For 6 months, Elena had endured a relationship that slowly strangled the light from her eyes. Marcus Reed had seemed charming at first, attentive and generous, but charm had given way to control. He monitored her phone calls, questioned her whereabouts, isolated her from friends, and turned her world into a cage disguised as love. 3 weeks ago, Elena had made her decision. She contacted her best friend Sophia Chen in secret, opened a new bank account, and began planning her escape with the precision of a military operation. She had attended therapy sessions Marcus knew nothing about, where a kind counselor named Dr. Patricia Williams helped her understand that what she experienced was not love but abuse. The gala was Elena's first public appearance since deciding to leave Marcus. She had told him she was visiting her sick aunt in Connecticut, a lie he believed because he never bothered to verify the things she said anymore. His control was so complete in his mind that deception seemed impossible. Elena used a burner phone to coordinate with Sophia, who had helped her secure a small apartment across town and had accompanied her to change the locks on her personal storage unit where she had been gradually moving her most precious belongings. Elena sipped champagne and forced herself to smile at the gallery director discussing an upcoming exhibition. Art had always been her sanctuary, her passion since childhood when her Italian grandmother would take her to museums and teach her to see the stories hidden in brushstrokes and marble. She had worked her way up from intern to assistant curator to her current position at the Morrison Gallery, one of the city's most prestigious contemporary art spaces. Her expertise in Renaissance art and modern interpretations had earned her respect in circles that typically dismissed anyone under 40. Art was the one thing Marcus could not take from her, though he had tried, mocking her career as frivolous and suggesting she would be better suited staying home. The evening progressed with speeches and silent auction announcements. Elena bid on a small sculpture, not because she expected to win, but because maintaining appearances mattered. She chatted with colleagues, laughed at appropriate moments, and felt the unfamiliar sensation of hope blooming in her chest. In 2 days she would simply disappear from Marcus's life. She would send him a message from her lawyer, block his number, and begin the process of healing. Dr. Williams had warned her that leaving was the most dangerous time, that men like Marcus often escalated when they sensed losing control, but Elena had taken precautions. She varied her routes to work, parked in different locations, and never mentioned her plans anywhere Marcus might discover them. At precisely 9:15, Elena excused herself to use the restroom. The Bellevue's ladies' lounge was as opulent as the rest of the hotel, featuring vintage settees and gold-framed mirrors that reflected her image back at her. She looked tired despite the makeup, the strain of living a double life evident in the slight shadows beneath her eyes. She refreshed her lipstick and took a deep breath, reminding herself that freedom was within reach. Just 2 more days. When she emerged from the lounge, her heart stopped. Marcus Reed stood near the ballroom entrance, his tall frame unmistakable even from a distance, his blonde hair perfectly styled, his expression cold and searching. Panic seized Elena's throat. He was not supposed to be here. He was supposed to be at his office, working late as he always did on Thursdays. How had he found her? Her phone. Despite using the burner, she had forgotten to leave her regular phone at home. He must have tracked it. Marcus's eyes scanned the crowd, and Elena ducked behind a marble column, her mind racing. The ballroom had multiple exits, but all led to corridors where she would be exposed. The main lobby was too open. She could not return to the gala without him seeing her. Her hands trembled as she considered her options. She could call hotel security, but what would she say? That her boyfriend, who looked perfectly respectable in his expensive suit, was looking for her? They would think her paranoid or dramatic. Marcus moved deeper into the ballroom, his head turning systematically as he searched. Elena used his distraction to slip through a side door marked, "Authorized personnel only," that led to a service corridor. Her heels clicked against polished floors as she hurried past confused hotel staff who were too busy managing the gala to question a well-dressed woman rushing through their workspace. She emerged into another hallway lined with meeting rooms, all dark and locked for the evening. Behind her, she heard Marcus's voice calling her name, the false sweetness barely masking his anger. He had seen her leave the ballroom. Elena ran, gathering her dress in her hands, her breath coming in sharp gasps. She reached a bank of elevators and frantically pressed the button, but the indicator showed the nearest elevator was on the 10th floor, descending slowly. Too slow. Marcus appeared at the end of the corridor, his face transforming when he spotted her. The mask of civility cracked, revealing the rage beneath. "Elena, where the hell do you think you're going?" His voice echoed off the walls, harsh and demanding. Elena did not wait for the elevator. She bolted up the nearby stairwell, climbing 2 steps at a time despite her dress and heels. She heard Marcus enter the stairwell behind her, his footsteps thundering upward. The sound of his pursuit triggered something primal in Elena, the flight response overriding rational thought. She burst through the door onto the 14th floor, the hotel's penthouse level, where suites cost more per night than most people earned in a month. The hallway was carpeted in deep burgundy, with ornate sconces casting warm light. Elena tried door after door, finding them all locked, her desperation growing with each failed attempt. She could hear Marcus in the stairwell getting closer. Then, miraculously, a door gave way. Room 1408 opened under her hand, unlocked. Elena did not question the gift of fortune. She slipped inside and closed the door silently, engaging the security latch with shaking fingers. The penthouse suite was breathtaking even in her terrified state. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering city, expensive furniture arranged with designer precision, original artwork on the walls that her trained eye recognized as valuable pieces. The air smelled of sandalwood and something else, something masculine and expensive. Someone clearly stayed here, and they had wealth that dwarfed anything Elena had encountered. She heard Marcus in the hallway trying doors, getting closer. Elena needed to hide. The bedroom seemed too obvious and the bathroom would trap her. Then she saw the walk-in closet, its door slightly ajar. She slipped inside and closed herself among expensive suits, dress shirts, and leather shoes arranged with military precision. The closet smelled like its owner, cedar and cologne and something indefinable. Elena pressed herself against the back wall between cashmere coats and tailored jackets and held her breath. Marcus's voice filtered through the suite's door as he passed by in the hallway, calling her name with increasing frustration. Elena remained frozen, counting her heartbeats, praying he would not try this particular door. Minutes stretched into eternality. Gradually, Marcus's voice faded as he moved farther down the corridor. Elena allowed herself a small breath of relief, but she knew she could not leave yet. He might be waiting, watching the hallway. She would wait an hour, she decided, then slip out and find another way down to the lobby. She could call Sophia from a hotel phone and ask her to pick her up from the service entrance. The plan formed in her mind, fragile but possible. Elena closed her eyes, willing her racing heart to slow. The sound of the suite door opening nearly stopped that heart entirely. Heavy footsteps crossed the hardwood floor of the living area, measured and controlled. A man's footsteps. The owner of the suite had returned. Elena's eyes widened in the darkness of the closet. She had not merely trespassed into an empty room, she had invaded someone's private space, hidden herself among their belongings like a thief. Her breathing became shallow as panic threatened to overwhelm her completely. Through the crack in the closet door, Elena heard the clink of ice in a glass, the sound of liquid being poured. The footsteps moved closer, entering the bedroom. She saw a shadow pass by the closet door. Then silence fell, heavy and waiting. Elena realized with growing dread that the man knew someone was in his suite. How could he not? She had likely left signs of her presence, disturbed the careful arrangement of his space. The closet door opened abruptly, light flooding Elena's hiding place. She found herself staring at a man who seemed carved from marble and shadow, all sharp angles and controlled power. He stood well over 6 feet tall, his broad shoulders filling the doorway, his black hair slightly disheveled as though he had run his hands through it repeatedly. His eyes, dark and penetrating, fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously seen and evaluated. He wore a black suit with the jacket unbuttoned, his white shirt open at the collar, revealing the strong column of his throat. In his right hand he held a gun, pointed at the floor but ready. Dante Salvatore had expected many things when he opened his closet door. An assassin perhaps, sent by the Caruso family to settle old scores. A corporate spy trying to steal documents. Even a foolish burglar who somehow bypassed hotel security. What he had not expected was a terrified woman in an evening gown, her dark eyes wide with fear, tears streaking her carefully applied makeup, pressed against his suits like she wished she could disappear into the fabric. For a moment neither spoke. Dante's analytical mind, trained by years of navigating the treacherous waters of organized crime and legitimate business alike, processed every detail. She was not armed. Her fear was genuine, not the calculated performance of a honeypot operative. Her expensive dress and jewelry suggested she belonged at the gala downstairs, not breaking into penthouse suites. The way she held herself, simultaneously defiant and terrified, spoke of someone pushed to desperation rather than planning. "Please," Elena whispered, her voice breaking. "Please don't call security. I can explain." Dante lowered the gun but did not holster it. "You have 60 seconds to explain why you are in my closet." His voice was deep, controlled, with an edge that suggested he was accustomed to being obeyed without question. Elena stumbled over her words, trying to condense her terror into coherent sentences. She told him about Marcus, about running, about the unlocked door being her only option. She watched Dante's expression remain unreadable, those dark eyes never leaving her face, and she wondered if she had simply traded one danger for another. Before Dante could respond, aggressive knocking shattered the sweet silence. Both of them froze. Marcus's voice, loud and demanding, came through the door. "I know she's in there. Elena, come out. We're staying in this hotel together, and you're embarrassing me with this tantrum." Elena's face lost all color. She looked at Dante with desperation so raw it caught him off guard. In his world, fear was currency and weakness was exploited, but something about this woman's situation triggered an unexpected response. Perhaps it reminded him of his mother's stories of fleeing his abusive father decades ago, before she found safety with the Salvatore family. Perhaps it was simply that Dante despised men who terrorized women, considering such behavior the mark of cowards. Dante made his decision in the space between heartbeats. He holstered his weapon beneath his jacket and held out his hand to Elena. "Do you want my help?" Elena did not hesitate. She placed her trembling hand in his and nodded. Dante pulled her gently from the closet, steadying her when she stumbled slightly. He moved her behind him, positioning himself between her and the door, then crossed the suite's living area with the confidence of a man who had faced down far more dangerous threats than an abusive boyfriend. When Dante opened the door, Marcus's aggressive expression faltered. He had been preparing to confront Elena, or perhaps simply to bully his way into a room he assumed contained her. What he encountered instead was a man who radiated authority and barely contained danger. Dante stood in the doorway, blocking any view into the suite, his posture relaxed but his eyes cold. "Can I help you?" Dante's voice was pleasant, almost friendly, but Marcus was not foolish enough to miss the warning beneath. Marcus tried to peer around Dante into the suite. "My girlfriend ran in here. Elena Moretti. Dark hair, green dress. I need to speak with her." "There is no one here by that name," Dante replied evenly. "You are mistaken. I saw her come onto this floor," Marcus insisted, his voice rising. "She's playing games, hiding from me. Look, buddy, this is between me and my girlfriend. Just let me talk to her." Dante's expression did not change, but something in his eyes shifted, becoming harder, more dangerous. "I will say this once. There is no woman in my suite. You are disturbing me with false accusations. I suggest you leave before I call security and have you removed from the hotel." Marcus's hands clenched into fists. He was tall and athletic, accustomed to using his physical presence to intimidate, but Dante stood several inches taller and possessed the kind of presence that came not from gym workouts but from genuine danger survived and inflicted. The hallway seemed to grow colder. "Who the hell are you?" Marcus demanded, trying to salvage his authority. "Someone you do not want to antagonize," Dante answered simply. He pulled out his phone and began dialing. "Hello, this is Mr. Salvatore in penthouse suite 1408. There is an intoxicated man harassing me and making wild accusations. I would like him removed from the hotel immediately and barred from the property." The name Salvatore achieved what Dante's demeanor had not. Marcus's eyes widened slightly. Even someone outside the city's underworld had heard of the Salvatore family, their legitimate business empire, their rumored connections to organizations that operated in shadows. Marcus was intelligent enough, barely, to recognize when he was outmatched. "This isn't over," Marcus said, directing his words past Dante toward wherever he imagined Elena was hiding. "You can't hide forever, Elena. I know you're here." "Leave," Dante said, his voice dropping to a register that promised consequences. "Now." Within minutes, hotel security arrived, led by a man who greeted Dante with obvious respect and perhaps a touch of fear. Marcus protested, claiming his girlfriend was being held in the suite, but Dante's calm denial and Marcus's inability to provide any evidence made him look increasingly unhinged. The security team escorted Marcus to the lobby, and Dante made it clear that Marcus Reed was to be permanently banned from the Bellevue Hotel. A few discreet phone calls ensured that Marcus would also find himself unwelcome at several other establishments throughout the city. When Dante closed the door and engaged all the security locks, he found Elena standing in the middle of his living room, looking lost and overwhelmed. Tears streamed down her face, though she made no sound, crying silently in the way of someone who had learned not to draw attention to her pain. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you. I don't know what he would have done if you had not helped me." Dante poured 2 glasses of scotch from his bar, expensive single malt that most people never tasted. He offered one to Elena, who took it with shaking hands. "Sit," he instructed, gesturing to the leather sofa. "You are safe here. He will not bother you again tonight." Elena collapsed onto the sofa, exhaustion replacing adrenaline. She took a sip of the scotch and coughed slightly at its strength, then took another sip, welcoming the burn that gave her something to feel besides fear. Dante sat in the armchair across from her, maintaining a respectful distance, studying her with that same intense gaze that made her feel like he could see straight through to her soul. "Tell me," Dante said simply. And Elena did. The words poured out in a flood, months of suppressed fear and pain finding release. She told him about Marcus's escalating control, the isolation, the verbal abuse that sometimes teetered on the edge of physical violence. She explained her escape plan, how tonight was supposed to be part of her careful exit strategy. She admitted her terror that Marcus would find her new apartment, that he would destroy the life she was trying to build. Dante listened without interruption, his expression neutral but his eyes revealing a cold anger that was not directed at Elena. When she finally fell silent, exhausted by confession, he stood and walked to the windows overlooking the city. "What do you do, Elena Moretti?" he asked. The question surprised her. "I am a curator. At the Morrison Gallery. I specialize in Renaissance art and contemporary pieces that reference classical themes." Dante turned to look at her, genuine interest flickering across his features. "You understand art." "It is my passion," Elena said softly. "The only thing that has kept me sane these past months." "I have a collection," Dante said almost to himself. "Quite extensive. It requires someone with expertise to properly catalog and maintain it. My current curator is retiring at the end of the month." Elena stared at him, not understanding where this was leading. That is a significant responsibility. "It is also a well-paid position," Dante continued, "that comes with housing on my estate, security, and the freedom to work without interference." He moved back to the armchair and sat, leaning forward slightly. "I am offering you a job, Elena. You would work for me, live in safety, and have the resources to establish your independence. In return, you would care for my collection and perhaps help me acquire new pieces." "I don't understand," Elena said slowly. "You don't know me. Why would you do this?" Dante considered his answer carefully. "I dislike men who terrorize women. I appreciate courage, and hiding in a stranger's closet rather than submitting to your ex-boyfriend's demands demonstrates courage. I need a curator. You need protection and a fresh start. It is a mutually beneficial arrangement." "There is more to you than you are telling me," Elena said, her curator's eye for detail extending to people. "The security team knew you. They feared you." The Salvatore name made Marcus back down. "I run several businesses," Dante replied, not quite lying but not telling the complete truth. "Real estate development, hospitality ventures, import-export operations. I have lived in this city my entire life and built relationships across many industries. People know my name." What he did not say was that the Salvatore family controlled a significant portion of the city's underground economy, that his businesses laundered money for operations that existed in legal gray areas, that men feared him because he had earned that fear through calculated ruthlessness. Dante had inherited the family business from his uncle 5 years ago and had transformed it from a brutal street operation into a sophisticated empire that straddled both legitimate and illegitimate worlds. He was known as the architect for his strategic mind, his ability to plan operations with chess master precision. Elena studied him, her intelligent eyes missing nothing. She suspected there was more to Dante Salvatore than he revealed, but she was also desperate and exhausted. The offer represented safety, employment, and a chance to rebuild. Perhaps it was foolish to accept help from a virtual stranger, but he had protected her when he could have simply called security and had her removed. That meant something. "I would be working for you," Elena said carefully. Not anything else? You would be my employee, Dante confirmed. Nothing more unless you ever desired otherwise, which would be entirely your choice. I am offering you employment and protection, Elena. What you make of that opportunity is up to you. The suite's second bedroom was as luxurious as the rest of the penthouse, with a king-sized bed covered in expensive linens and an ensuite bathroom featuring a soaking tub and separate shower. Dante provided Elena with one of his shirts to sleep in, the fabric soft and smelling of his cologne. She locked the bedroom door more out of habit than fear and finally allowed herself to cry properly, releasing the terror and relief in equal measure. That night, Elena barely slept. Her mind raced with questions and possibilities. When dawn painted the city in shades of gold and pink, she emerged from the bedroom to find Dante already awake, dressed in fresh clothes, speaking quietly on his phone in Italian. He ended the call when he saw her and gestured to the breakfast spread laid out on the dining table. Fresh pastries, fruit, coffee, and juice appeared courtesy of the hotel's room service. Eat, Dante instructed. Then we will discuss the details of your employment. Over breakfast, Dante outlined the position. She would live in the guest house on his estate, a private cottage with full amenities. Her salary would be 3 times what she currently earned at the Morrison Gallery. She would have access to his collection, which he described as including pieces from the Renaissance through contemporary periods, with a focus on Italian masters and modern American artists. Her responsibilities would include cataloging, conservation coordination, and advising him on potential acquisitions. I will provide you with a new phone, Dante added. Untraceable. Your ex-boyfriend will not find you through technology. My head of security, my brother Nico, will ensure your former apartment and belongings are safely retrieved and moved to the estate. You will give notice at the Morrison Gallery today, and you will start working for me immediately. This is very generous, Elena said carefully. Too generous for someone you just met. Dante met her eyes across the table. I make decisions quickly, Elena. It is how I have built my success. I trust my instincts, and my instincts tell me you are exactly what I need for this position. You are intelligent, educated, and you understand the value of discretion. You also need what I can provide. It is simply a business arrangement. But it was not simply business, though neither of them acknowledged it. Something had shifted in that closet the previous night, some connection formed between two people who existed in different worlds. Dante had built his life on control and distance, trusting no one outside his immediate family. Elena had just escaped a relationship built on control and manipulation. Neither was looking for romance or complication. Yet as they finalized the details of her employment over coffee and pastries, both felt the pull of possibility, the sense that the universe had pushed them together for reasons neither fully understood. Elena accepted the position. She called the Morrison Gallery and gave 2 weeks' notice, citing a family emergency that required her to relocate. She called Sophia from Dante's secure phone and explained the situation in broad strokes, leaving out certain details but assuring her best friend that she was safe and making a positive change. Sophia was skeptical but trusted Elena's judgment. By noon, Elena Moretti's life had transformed completely. She was no longer hiding from Marcus Reed, no longer planning her escape in secret. She was employed by one of the city's most powerful men, about to move into a secure estate, and beginning a new chapter that promised both safety and mystery. As Dante's driver took her to collect her essential belongings from the secret apartment she had rented, Elena looked out the car window at the city she had lived in her entire life and saw it with new eyes. She did not yet know the full truth about Dante Salvatore and the empire he controlled. She did not know that accepting his protection meant entering a world of dangerous alliances and calculated violence, of family loyalty and ruthless business. She did not know that the man who had saved her from her closet hiding spot would become the most important person in her life, that the job offer was the beginning of a love story neither of them saw coming. All Elena knew was that for the first time in months she felt hope. And that was enough. 3 months transformed Elena Moretti's world beyond recognition. The Salvatore estate sprawled across 15 acres in the city's exclusive Riverside district, hidden behind stone walls and sophisticated security that made Fort Knox look casual. The main house was a masterpiece of Italian Renaissance architecture, all limestone facades and arched windows, surrounded by manicured gardens that bloomed with roses even as autumn painted the trees in shades of amber and crimson. Elena's cottage sat tucked among ancient oak trees at the edge of the property, a 2-bedroom guest house with its own kitchen, living area, and a sunroom that she had converted into a personal studio for sketching and research. The art collection Dante owned exceeded anything Elena had encountered in her professional career. His climate-controlled gallery occupied the estate's entire east wing, 3 floors of carefully curated masterpieces that represented not just financial investment but genuine appreciation for artistic achievement. She had spent the first month simply cataloging what existed, documenting everything from a small Caravaggio study to contemporary pieces by emerging artists whose work commanded 6 figures at auction. Dante possessed an eclectic taste that surprised her, moving seamlessly from classical Italian works to bold modern abstracts, from delicate Japanese prints to provocative photography. Working for Dante meant encountering the truth about his life in careful increments, like adjusting to darkness until shapes became visible. Elena was intelligent enough to piece together what he never directly stated. The men who visited the estate for private meetings in Dante's study were not merely business associates discussing real estate deals. The security team led by Dante Salvatore, Dante's younger brother, carried themselves with military precision and wore weapons as casually as other men wore watches. The conversations she occasionally overheard, conducted in Italian or carefully coded English, referenced territories and families and arrangements that had nothing to do with legitimate commerce. Dante Salvatore was a mafia boss. Not some minor player but someone significant, someone whose name carried weight across the city's criminal landscape. Elena had confirmed her suspicions one evening when she stayed late in the gallery and overheard Nico and Dante discussing a shipment that needed protection, referencing the Caruso family's interference with language that made violence sound like business strategy. She had frozen behind a Renaissance bronze sculpture, barely breathing, listening to Dante issue orders with the same calm authority he used when discussing art acquisitions. She should have been terrified. Should have packed her belongings and disappeared. But 3 months in Dante's employ had revealed the complexity beneath the dangerous surface. Yes, he controlled criminal operations. Yes, men feared him. But he also ran legitimate businesses that employed hundreds of people, donated generously to children's hospitals and arts programs, and lived by a code of honor that seemed antiquated in modern times. Dante protected his neighborhood, mediated disputes, and ensured that innocent people remained untouched by the violence that occasionally erupted between rival organizations. Elena had also discovered that Dante Salvatore was brilliant, cultured, and unexpectedly kind. He spoke 5 languages fluently, could discuss Renaissance philosophy and contemporary political theory with equal expertise, and possessed a dry sense of humor that emerged when he relaxed his careful control. He asked her opinion on potential acquisitions and actually listened, implementing her suggestions about conservation and display. He never once made her feel like an employee in a subservient position but rather treated her as a valued expert whose knowledge he respected. Their late-night conversations had become routine. After Elena finished her work in the gallery and Dante concluded whatever business occupied his days and evenings, they would find themselves in the estate's library, a 2-story room lined with first editions and leather-bound volumes, sharing wine and discussing everything from art history to philosophy to their respective childhoods. Elena learned that Dante's father had been an abusive man who died when Dante was 12, that his mother Isabella had raised him and Nico alone until his uncle recruited them into the family business, that Dante had spent his teenage years learning to navigate a world where weakness meant death. Dante, in turn, learned about Elena's passion for art that stemmed from her Italian grandmother, her scholarship to university where she had studied art history while working 3 jobs, her career-building expertise in a field dominated by older men who initially dismissed her. He learned that she loved classical music and terrible reality television in equal measure, that she spoke Italian fluently thanks to childhood summers in Florence, that she had a wicked sense of humor hidden beneath her professional demeanor. The attraction between them grew like ivy, slowly but inevitably, wrapping around both of them until denying it became impossible. Elena noticed the way Dante's eyes followed her when she moved through the gallery, the way his expression softened when she laughed, the way he found excuses to be near her even when business demanded his attention elsewhere. She caught herself choosing outfits she knew he would appreciate, wearing her hair down because she had noticed his gaze linger on it, accepting invitations to accompany him to gallery openings and charity events as his art consultant even though such appearances were not strictly part of her job description. Neither acknowledged what was happening. Elena still carried scars from Marcus's abuse, flinching sometimes when men moved too quickly near her, struggling with trust despite Dante's consistent respect for her boundaries. Dante seemed equally reluctant to pursue the attraction, maintaining professional distance even as his eyes betrayed his feelings. Perhaps he feared his world would destroy her. Perhaps he had convinced himself that someone like Elena, educated and cultured and fundamentally good, could never truly accept someone like him. Isabella Salvatore, the family matriarch, saw what both her son and Elena refused to acknowledge. She was a formidable woman in her 60s, elegant and sharp-eyed, who had survived abandoning an abusive husband and building a life in a world controlled by men. She visited the estate weekly, ostensibly to check on family business but really to observe Dante's interaction with his new curator. After one such visit, she pulled Elena aside in the garden. "My son is different since you arrived," Isabella said in Italian, her preferred language for important conversations. "He smiles more. He seems less burdened." Elena responded in the same language, her Florentine accent marking her grandmother's influence. "I am simply doing my job, Mrs. Salvatore. Helping with the collection." Isabella's smile was knowing. "My dear girl, I raised two sons in a world that tried to destroy them both. I know what it looks like when someone begins to heal old wounds. Dante has lived with loneliness for so long he no longer recognizes it as loneliness. But you have shown him something different." "I don't think I am what he needs," Elena said quietly, her heart aching even as she spoke the words. "I am still recovering from my own situation. And his life, his real life beyond this estate. I don't know if I could survive in that world." Isabella took Elena's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "The question is not whether you can survive in his world but whether you want to. Love does not ask for perfect circumstances. It simply asks if you are brave enough to try." The conversation haunted Elena through the following weeks. She found herself watching Dante with new awareness, seeing not just the dangerous man who commanded respect and fear, but the lonely soul who had built walls so high he forgot how to let people in. She noticed how he isolated himself after particularly difficult meetings, how he shouldered responsibility for his family and organization without complaint, how he ensured everyone around him was protected and provided for while denying himself the same care. Autumn deepened into early winter. Elena's 27th birthday arrived on a Tuesday in late November, and she mentioned it to no one except Sophia during one of their weekly phone calls. She spent the day working in the gallery, cataloging a new acquisition Dante had secured at auction, a 16th-century Venetian painting that required delicate restoration. She was so absorbed in documenting the piece that she did not notice the passage of time until Nico appeared in the gallery doorway. "Dante wants to see you in the main house," Nico said, his expression giving nothing away. Dining room. Elena's heart jumped irrationally. Had she done something wrong? Made an error in the cataloging? She followed Nico through the estate's corridors, her mind racing through possibilities. When she entered the dining room, she stopped in shock. The table was set for an intimate dinner, candles glowing in silver holders, fine china arranged with care. Dante stood near the windows, dressed in a dark suit that emphasized his commanding presence, holding a small wrapped box. The entire scene was so unexpected that Elena could only stare. "Happy birthday," Dante said simply. "How did you know?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I make it my business to know important details about the people in my life," Dante replied, moving closer. "You have worked tirelessly for 3 months, transformed my collections organization, and asked for nothing beyond your salary. I thought you deserved acknowledgement." The dinner was extraordinary, prepared by the estate's chef, featuring Elena's favorite foods that Dante had somehow discovered through careful observation. They talked for hours, the conversation flowing as easily as the wine, moving from art to literature to the philosophical questions that occupied both their minds. Dante presented her with the wrapped box, which contained a first edition of The Lives of the Artists by Giorgio Vasari, the 16th-century text that had inspired Elena's love of art history. Inside the front cover, Dante had written a note in his precise handwriting, "For Elena, who brings art to life." Something shifted that night, some invisible boundary crossed. When Dante walked Elena back to her cottage through the garden, their hands brushed and neither pulled away. At her door, they stood close enough that Elena could smell his cologne, could feel the warmth radiating from his body in the cold night air. "Thank you," Elena said softly. "For everything. For saving me that night at the hotel. For giving me this opportunity. For tonight." Dante reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "You saved yourself, Elena. You were brave enough to hide in a stranger's closet rather than submit. I simply provided an alternative path." Their eyes met, held. The moment stretched, heavy with possibility and unspoken feelings. Then Dante stepped back, his professional mask sliding into place, and bid her good night. Elena entered her cottage feeling both disappointed and relieved, her heart pounding with emotions she was not ready to name. The following weeks brought increasing tension to the Salvatore operations. Vincent Caruso, boss of a rival family, had been making aggressive moves into territories Dante controlled, challenging agreements that had maintained peace for years. Nico reported escalating confrontations, shots fired at neutral meeting locations, threats issued against Salvatore business interests. Dante spent more time in meetings, his expression growing harder, the weight of leadership evident in every line of his face. Elena noticed his increased stress but did not pry, understanding that some parts of his life remained separate from her role. She focused on her work, preparing for an exhibition of select pieces from Dante's collection that would be displayed at a prestigious gallery downtown. The event would showcase Dante's sophisticated taste to the city's cultural elite while providing Elena an opportunity to establish her credentials beyond the Morrison Gallery. The exhibition opening fell on a cold December evening. Elena wore a midnight blue gown that Dante had arranged to be delivered to her cottage with a note saying simply, "For tonight." The dress fit perfectly, elegant and understated, making her feel confident and beautiful. When she emerged from her cottage, she found Dante waiting by the car, his expression when he saw her worth more than any compliment. The gallery buzzed with collectors, critics, and society figures examining the pieces Elena had selected and arranged. She moved through the crowd with professional grace, discussing the collection's highlights, fielding questions about provenance and artistic significance. Dante remained nearby, not hovering but present, his pride in her expertise evident. Several collectors approached him about potential sales, but Dante made it clear that his collection was private, curated for appreciation rather than profit. Marcus Reed appeared at precisely 8:30, a ghost from a nightmare Elena thought she had escaped. He looked the same, handsome in a superficial way, his blonde hair perfect, his smile practiced. But where Elena once saw charm, she now recognized manipulation. He approached her while she spoke with the museum director, inserting himself into the conversation with false friendliness. "Elena," Marcus said warmly as though they were old friends. "How wonderful to see you again. I heard you had left the Morrison Gallery. Landed on your feet, I see." Elena's blood ran cold. She managed to keep her expression neutral, her curator's training serving her well. "Marcus, this is unexpected. I've been trying to reach you," Marcus continued, his tone suggesting concern rather than the stalking it represented. "Your old number doesn't work. I was worried something had happened. We need to talk about how things ended. I think there were misunderstandings." The museum director excused himself, sensing tension. Elena found herself alone with Marcus in a corner of the gallery, surrounded by art but feeling trapped. "There were no misunderstandings," she said quietly but firmly. "I left because the relationship was unhealthy. There is nothing to discuss." Marcus's expression hardened slightly, the mask slipping. "You disappeared. Took a restraining order out against me, embarrassed me in front of colleagues. All because you overreacted to normal relationship dynamics. I deserve an explanation." "You deserve nothing from me," Elena said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I asked you to leave me alone. That request has not changed." Marcus stepped closer, invading her space in the way he always had when exerting control. "You think you can just walk away? Start a new life? I know you're working for Salvatore. Living on his estate. Are you sleeping with him, Elena? Did you leave me for a criminal?" Before Elena could respond, Dante appeared at her side, his presence like a cold wind that made Marcus step back instinctively. "Mr. Reed," Dante said pleasantly, though his eyes were ice. "I believe Ms. Moretti asked you to leave her alone. You are violating a restraining order by being near her." "This is a public event," Marcus protested, though his confidence wavered. "I have every right to be here." "This is a private exhibition," Dante corrected smoothly. "By invitation only. You were not invited. My security team will escort you out." Nico appeared with two other men, their presence making clear that resistance would be unwise. Marcus's face flushed with anger and humiliation, but he had learned enough from their first encounter to recognize when he was outmatched. As Nico escorted him toward the exit, Marcus turned back to Elena. "This is not over," he said, the threat clear despite the civilized setting. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur. Elena maintained her professional demeanor, but Dante noticed her tension, the way her hands trembled slightly when she thought no one was watching. He stayed close, a protective presence that both comforted and confused her. When the last guest departed and the gallery staff began the process of securing the artwork, Dante guided Elena to his car. "He has been watching you," Dante said as they drove through the city streets. "Following you. My security team has noted his presence near the estate on 3 occasions in the past month. I had hoped he would lose interest and move on. Clearly, I underestimated his obsession. Elena stared out the window, feeling violated all over again. I thought I was safe. I thought the restraining order and moving would be enough. Men like Marcus Reed do not respect legal boundaries, Dante said grimly. They view women as possessions. When they lose control of that possession, they escalate. What do I do? Elena asked, her voice small. Dante's jaw tightened. You let me handle it. Marcus Reed will not bother you again. Something in his tone sent a chill through Elena. Dante, what are you going to do? What I do best, he replied. Solve problems. Elena understood then the full implications of being under Dante Salvatore's protection. He would not simply call lawyers or rely on law enforcement. He would use the power and resources of his organization to eliminate Marcus as a threat. Part of her was horrified by the implications. Another part, the part that had lived in fear for too long, felt relief. They did not speak of Marcus again that night. When they reached the estate, Dante walked Elena to her cottage, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, a gesture of protection and something more. At her door, Elena turned to face him, seeing past the dangerous reputation to the man who had shown her nothing but respect and kindness. I know what you are, Elena said quietly. I have known for months. The meetings, the business that is not really business, the power you wield. I am not naive, Dante. I know you know, Dante replied, his dark eyes searching her face. I have never tried to hide my world from you, only to shield you from its darker aspects. Does knowing change how you see me? Elena considered the question seriously. You have shown me more honor and protection than any supposedly good man ever has. You have respected my boundaries, valued my expertise, and made me feel safe for the first time in years. Whatever else you are, whatever your business entails, those things matter more to me. The admission hung between them, heavy with meaning. Dante reached up and cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. You matter to me, Elena. More than you should. More than is wise for either of us. Then why do we keep denying it? Elena whispered. Because I am afraid my world will destroy you, Dante said honestly. Because you deserve better than a man with blood on his hands. Because loving me means accepting dangers you should never have to face. What if I am willing to face them? Elena asked, her heart pounding. Dante's control, so carefully maintained for months, finally shattered. He kissed her with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about his reputation, his lips moving against hers like a question and an answer simultaneously. Elena responded, her arms winding around his neck, pulling him closer, pouring months of suppressed emotion into the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, their eyes locked. This changes everything, Dante said. I know, Elena replied. I am not afraid. But she should have been. Because Marcus Reed, humiliated and obsessed, was not finished. He had made connections of his own, reaching out to Vincent Caruso with information about Dante's relationship with Elena, offering intelligence in exchange for assistance with his revenge. Vincent, always looking for leverage against the Salvatore family, saw opportunity in Marcus's obsession. 2 days after the gallery exhibition, Elena left the estate to meet Sofia for lunch at a restaurant downtown. She had insisted on maintaining some independence, some connection to her life outside Dante's protective bubble. Nico had assigned her a security detail, but Elena had convinced them to remain discreet, not wanting to alarm Sofia or draw attention during a simple lunch. The restaurant was crowded, bustling with the lunchtime rush. Elena and Sofia caught up on each other's lives, Sofia expressing both happiness at Elena's safety and concern about her involvement with Dante. They were halfway through their meal when Elena excused herself to use the restroom. She never made it there. Marcus emerged from where he had been waiting, having followed her from the estate, having learned her patterns through patient observation. He grabbed Elena's arm roughly, pulling her toward the restaurant's service exit. Elena struggled, but Marcus had help. 2 men appeared, Vincent Caruso's soldiers, professionally efficient. They bundled Elena out the back door and into a waiting van before her security detail even realized she had left her table. The panic Elena felt exceeded anything she had experienced before. She was bound, gagged, thrown into the back of the van as it sped through city streets. Marcus sat beside her, his expression a twisted mixture of triumph and rage. You thought you could embarrass me? Reject me? I'm going to teach you what happens to women who do not know their place. And Salvatore is going to watch you learn that lesson. They took her to an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district, a location Vincent Caruso's family used for operations that required privacy. The building smelled of rust and oil, its broken windows allowing cold winter air to whistle through. They tied Elena to a chair in the center of the vast empty space, Marcus pacing around her like a predator, delivering a monologue about how she had ruined his life, how she owed him an apology, how they would be together again once she understood her mistakes. Elena listened to his ranting and recognized it for what it was: delusion wrapped in entitlement. Marcus had convinced himself that their relationship was real, that her escape was merely a misunderstanding that could be corrected through force. He existed in a fantasy where he was the victim and Elena the villain who needed to be punished and corrected. Vincent Caruso arrived an hour later, a man in his 50s who wore expensive suits and spoke with cultured precision that masked his brutal nature. He examined Elena like she was merchandise, then turned to Marcus with barely concealed contempt. "This is your grand plan? Kidnap Salvatore's woman and hope he backs down?" "He will give you what you want in exchange for her," Marcus insisted. "The territories, the agreements, whatever you have been fighting over." Vincent laughed coldly. "You understand nothing about how this works. Salvatore will not negotiate. He will come here with every resource at his disposal and burn this warehouse to the ground. You have not given me leverage. You have given me a war." "Then use me," Marcus said desperately. "Use her however you need to. Just help me keep her away from him." Elena felt sick, understanding that she was not being held for ransom but for Marcus's twisted sense of possession. Vincent studied her thoughtfully, then made a decision that would have consequences he did not anticipate. "Make the call," he ordered one of his men. "Tell Salvatore we have his curator. Tell him the price for her return is everything he has been refusing to give up: territory, cooperation, and his public acknowledgement of Caruso's supremacy. He has 6 hours to decide." Meanwhile, the Salvatore estate had erupted into controlled chaos. Nico discovered Elena missing when her security detail reported she had not returned from the restroom and was nowhere in the restaurant. A review of security footage showed the abduction, Marcus's face visible just before they exited. Dante's reaction was everything Vincent had predicted and feared. The man known for his strategic patience transformed into something primal and dangerous. Nico assembled their entire organization. Calls went out to loyal associates, favors were called in, information was gathered through every available source. Dante moved through it all with cold precision, his mind working through scenarios and strategies even as fury burned through his veins. When Vincent's ransom demand came through, Dante listened without expression, then ended the call. "Get me everything on Vincent's operations," Dante ordered. "Every property, every known location, every person in his organization. We have 6 hours. Use them." His mother Isabella appeared, her face pale but composed. "Dante, whatever you are planning, be smart about this. Vincent expects a frontal assault. He wants you angry and reckless." "I am neither," Dante replied, though his eyes said otherwise. "I am focused. Elena is mine, and I will not leave her in their hands for 6 seconds longer than necessary, let alone 6 hours." The information came together piece by piece. Vincent Caruso owned 17 properties throughout the city, but only 3 were suitable for holding someone secretly. Dante's network of informants provided intelligence: unusual activity at a warehouse in the industrial district, vehicles matching descriptions from Elena's abduction scene in the area, security presence that exceeded what a supposedly abandoned building required. Dante planned his response with the precision that had earned him his nickname. He would not negotiate. He would not wait. He would take his people, infiltrate the warehouse, and retrieve Elena before Vincent realized what was happening. The operation required perfect timing, overwhelming force, and the element of surprise. Dante had all 3. As night fell over the city, Dante Salvatore went to war. The assault on the warehouse was swift and brutal. Dante's people moved with military precision, neutralizing Vincent's security before alarms could be raised. They entered through multiple access points simultaneously, overwhelming resistance through superior numbers and tactics. Dante led the primary team, moving through the warehouse with his weapon drawn, his focus absolute. He found Elena in the main floor space, tied to a chair, Marcus standing nearby delivering another rambling speech about their inevitable reconciliation. Vincent Caruso stood to the side, speaking on his phone, likely coordinating his response to the attack. The scene burned itself into Dante's memory. Elena, bruised but defiant, her eyes meeting his with relief and trust. Marcus, oblivious in his delusion. Vincent, calculating and dangerous even in defeat. "Step away from her," Dante commanded, his voice carrying across the vast space. Marcus spun around, his face draining of color when he saw Dante and the armed men behind him. Vincent ended his call calmly, a slight smile playing at his lips. You brought an army for one woman. How romantic. Last chance, Dante said, his weapon trained on Vincent. Walk away. Leave the city. I will give you that courtesy for old time's sake. But you do not touch her. Ever. You think you have won? Vincent asked. I could kill her right now. End this before you reach her. You could try, Dante agreed. But you would be dead before her body hit the floor, and your family would be dismantled within the week. Is pride worth that price, Vincent? Vincent was many things but not suicidal. He recognized the mathematical certainty of his situation. Dante had brought overwhelming force, had planned every contingency. Fighting would mean death. He nodded slowly and stepped back, raising his hands in surrender. Marcus, however, had lost all rationality. No, she is mine. You cannot have her. He lunged toward Elena, pulling a knife from his jacket, intent on fulfilling his threat that if he could not have her, no one would. He did not make it 3 steps. Dante fired once, the shot echoing through the warehouse. Marcus collapsed, the knife clattering across concrete. The wound was not fatal, deliberately placed to incapacitate rather than kill, but the message was absolute. Elena gasped behind her gag, her eyes wide, witnessing the violence Dante was capable of when protecting what he loved. Nico and his team secured Vincent and his men while Dante reached Elena. He cut her bonds with gentle efficiency, removed the gag and pulled her into his arms. She collapsed against his chest, trembling with relief and reaction, her composure finally breaking. Dante held her tightly, one hand cradling her head, murmuring reassurances in Italian, promising her safety, declaring his love in words he had held back for months. I have you, he repeated over and over. You are safe. I will never let anyone hurt you again. Marcus was handed over to law enforcement with evidence of kidnapping, assault, and stalking that would ensure years in prison. Vincent Caruso was released with a warning: leave the city within 48 hours or face the full wrath of the Salvatore organization. He was intelligent enough to accept the terms. The warehouse was cleaned professionally, all evidence of the evening's events erased. Dante carried Elena to his car personally, refusing to let her out of his sight. On the drive back to the estate, she sat pressed against his side, his arm around her shoulders, neither speaking but both drawing comfort from physical closeness. At the estate, Dante brought her not to her cottage but to his own suite in the main house, settling her on his sofa with blankets and hot tea, tending to her minor injuries with surprising gentleness. You came for me, Elena whispered. Always, Dante replied, kneeling before her, taking her hands in his. I would burn the entire city down to keep you safe, Elena. Tonight proved what I have known for months but was too afraid to admit. I love you. Completely. Irrevocably. I know my world is dangerous, that loving me means accepting risks, but I cannot pretend anymore that I do not need you like I need air. Tears streamed down Elena's face but she was smiling. I love you too. I have loved you since that night you protected me at the hotel, maybe even since I hid in your closet and you chose kindness when you could have chosen anything else. I'm not afraid of your world, Dante. I am only afraid of living without you in it. They kissed then, not with the gentle exploration of their first kiss but with the passion of two people who had nearly lost each other, who understood how fragile life could be, how precious the connection they shared. When they finally broke apart, Dante rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said simply. Not someday, not eventually. I want you as my wife, my partner, bound to me in every way that matters. Elena laughed through her tears. That is the least romantic proposal in history. Dante smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face. Then I will do better. He stood and retrieved a small box from his desk, returning to kneel properly before her. Inside the box was a ring, a perfect emerald surrounded by diamonds, clearly vintage and incredibly valuable. This was my grandmother's. She gave it to my mother, who gave it to me years ago with instructions to present it only to the woman who made me believe in love. Elena Moretti, you brought light into my darkness. You made me want to be better, do better, build something beyond the empire I inherited. You are brilliant, brave, and beautiful, and I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of you. Will you marry me? Yes, Elena said without hesitation. Yes, Dante Salvatore, I will marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and they sealed their engagement with a kiss that promised forever, that transformed a night of terror into a night of commitment. Neither knew what challenges lay ahead, what dangers they would face together, but in that moment they knew certainty. They were stronger together than apart, and their love was worth fighting for. Spring arrived in a rush of cherry blossoms and renewed hope, transforming the Salvatore estate into something from a storybook. The gardens bloomed with flowers carefully tended by the estate's groundskeeping team, creating a riot of color against the limestone architecture of the main house. Elena walked through those gardens with Dante most evenings, discussing wedding plans and dreaming about their future, her grandmother's ring catching sunlight and scattering rainbows across her hand. They married on a perfect May afternoon at St. Catherine's Cathedral, a historic church in the city's oldest neighborhood where the Salvatore family had worshipped for 3 generations. Father Thomas Benedetto, who had known Dante since childhood and served as both priest and confidant, officiated the ceremony with warmth and genuine joy. The church filled to capacity with an eclectic mix of guests that represented both sides of Dante's life: business associates from his legitimate enterprises, cultural figures from the art world who had come to respect Elena's expertise, family members spanning generations, and yes, carefully vetted members of the organization that had built the Salvatore fortune. Elena wore a gown of ivory silk that combined classical elegance with modern simplicity, designed by an Italian couturier who had created something worthy of the Renaissance paintings Elena loved. Her dark hair was styled in soft waves, held back by a delicate tiara that had belonged to Dante's grandmother, the woman whose ring now sat on Elena's finger. She carried a bouquet of white roses and jasmine, their scent mixing with the church's incense in a combination that would forever mark this day in her memory. Sophia Chun stood as Elena's maid of honor, having overcome her initial skepticism about Dante to recognize how genuinely happy her best friend had become. The months since the engagement had shown Sophia a side of Dante she had not expected. His devotion to Elena's happiness, his willingness to include her friends and family in their life, his transformation from a man who ruled through fear to one who led with wisdom tempered by love. Sophia wore a gown of soft blue, holding Elena's bouquet during the vows, crying happily as her friend married a man who looked at her like she hung the stars. Nico Salvatore served as his brother's best man, standing tall and proud in his tailored suit, his usually serious expression softened by genuine happiness for Dante. The bond between the brothers had strengthened over the past months as Nico watched Dante shed the isolation that had defined him for years. Nico had confided to Elena once that he had worried Dante would never allow himself emotional connection, that the requirements of leading the family would consume him entirely. Elena's presence had proved those fears unfounded. Isabella Salvatore sat in the front pew, her elegant frame dressed in rose-colored silk, tears streaming down her face as she watched her oldest son marry the woman who had transformed his life. Beside her sat other family members, aunts and uncles and cousins who formed the extended network that supported and sustained the Salvatore operations. They had all embraced Elena with varying degrees of warmth, but Isabella's blessing had been the one that mattered most, the matriarch's approval opening doors and hearts throughout the family. The ceremony itself was traditional Catholic, conducted partly in English and partly in Italian, honoring both Elena's heritage and the Salvatore family roots. When Father Thomas asked Dante if he would take Elena as his wife, Dante's voice carried clear and strong through the cathedral, "I will." When the same question was posed to Elena, she responded with equal certainty, her eyes never leaving Dante's face. The exchange of vows was the moment Elena would remember most clearly in years to come. Dante took her hands in his dark eyes serious and full of emotion, and spoke words he had written himself rather than relying on traditional phrases. "Elena, you came into my life when I least expected it, hiding in my closet like a scared bird seeking shelter from a storm. In that moment I could have turned you away, called security, dismissed you as an inconvenience. Instead I saw your courage, your refusal to accept a life that diminished you. You have spent every day since teaching me what it means to be truly brave, showing me that strength is not about control or power but about choosing to love despite fear. You have brought light into places within me I thought would always remain dark. You have made me want to build rather than simply defend, to create beauty rather than manage violence. I promise to protect you, cherish you, respect you, and love you until my last breath. I promise to be worthy of the gift you have given me, the gift of your trust, your partnership, and your heart." There was not a dry eye in the cathedral when Dante finished speaking. Elena's own vows were equally heartfelt, speaking of the unexpected grace of finding love when she thought herself broken, of discovering that safety and passion could coexist, of choosing to build a life with a man whose complexity made him more, not less, worthy of devotion. When Father Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Dante kissed Elena with a tenderness that made the congregation erupt in applause and cheers. They walked back down the aisle together as the church bells rang out across the neighborhood, announcing to the city that Dante Salvatore had married his curator, that the Mafia boss had found his queen. The reception took place at the Salvatore estate, transformed for the occasion into something magical. Tents were erected in the gardens, strung with lights that would illuminate the evening celebration. Long tables groaned under the weight of Italian and American dishes prepared by the city's finest caterers. Wine flowed freely from Dante's extensive cellars, and an orchestra played everything from classical pieces to contemporary music that got even the most dignified guests onto the dance floor. Elena and Dante's first dance was to a classical Italian love song, one Elena's grandmother had sung to her as a child. Dante held her close, guiding her across the dance floor with surprising grace for a man known more for strategic thinking than physical elegance. They moved together perfectly, as though they had been dancing for years rather than months, their connection evident in every synchronized step. Nico's best man speech brought laughter and a few more tears. He told stories of growing up with Dante, of the older brother who had protected him fiercely, taught him everything he knew, and shouldered responsibilities that would have broken lesser men. I have watched my brother navigate impossible situations, make choices that required courage most people cannot imagine, and lead our family with honor and intelligence, Nico said, raising his glass. But I have never seen him as happy as he has been since Elena entered his life. She has given him something all the power and success in the world could not provide: peace. To Dante and Elena, may your marriage be blessed with the same love and devotion you have already shown each other. The celebration continued late into the night. Elena danced with her father-in-law's brother, with Father Thomas, with art collectors who congratulated her on both her marriage and her growing reputation in the cultural world. She watched Dante interact with his guests, seeing him move seamlessly between different groups, at ease with everyone from elderly family members to young associates building their careers. This was the man she had married: complex, powerful, capable of both tenderness and decisive action, beloved by those loyal to him and feared by those who opposed him. As midnight approached, Dante whisked Elena away from the celebration, leading her to a vintage car decorated with flowers and trailing tin cans. They were bound for a 2-week honeymoon in Italy, traveling to Florence, Venice, and Rome, retracing the paths Elena's grandmother had walked and adding their own memories to those ancient cities. The guests cheered and threw rice as the car pulled away from the estate, carrying the newlyweds toward their future. The honeymoon was everything Elena had dreamed and more. They wandered through the Uffizi Gallery hand in hand, stood before Michelangelo's David and discussed the technical mastery required to carve such perfection from marble, threw coins into the Trevi fountain and made wishes they whispered only to each other. In Venice, they rode gondolas through canals at sunset and made love in a centuries-old palazzo overlooking the Grand Canal. In Rome, Dante arranged a private tour of the Vatican's art collection, giving Elena access to pieces rarely shown to the public, watching her face light up with joy as she examined Renaissance masterworks. They talked about everything during those 2 weeks: their childhoods, their fears, their hopes for the future. Dante confessed his desire to transition the family business entirely into legitimate operations, to build an empire that did not require violence or moral compromise. Elena supported this vision, offering insights from her understanding of cultural institutions and philanthropic organizations. Together, they began planning the Salvatore Foundation, a charitable organization focused on arts education and support for survivors of domestic violence, causes close to both their hearts. When they returned to the estate, tan and relaxed and deeply in love, Elena began the process of transforming Dante's house into their home. She moved her belongings from the cottage into the main house, blending her personal touches with Dante's more austere aesthetic. Books appeared on previously empty shelves, plants filled corners that had been barren, and artwork from emerging artists Elena championed joined Dante's established collection. The house breathed differently, warmed by Elena's presence and the love that filled its rooms. The first year of marriage brought changes to the Salvatore operations exactly as Dante had promised. He began divesting from ventures that existed in legal gray areas, investing instead in real estate development, hospitality, and art-related businesses. The transition was not without resistance from within the organization. Some of the older members viewed Dante's reforms as weakness, a betrayal of the traditions that had built the family's power. Dante handled each challenge with his characteristic strategic thinking, replacing resistors with younger members who shared his vision, offering generous retirements to those who had served loyally but could not adapt. Vincent Caruso's departure from the city created a power vacuum that other families rushed to fill. Dante navigated these shifting alliances carefully, establishing himself as a legitimate business leader while maintaining enough of the old connections to ensure his family remained protected. It was a delicate balance, requiring constant attention and occasional displays of the power he still wielded when necessary. Elena supported him through it all, offering perspective from outside the insular world he had always inhabited, reminding him that the goal was not just changing what the family did but who they were. Elena's own career flourished. She opened Moretti House, a gallery dedicated to emerging artists, in a beautifully restored building in the Arts District. The gallery's opening exhibition received critical acclaim, establishing Elena as a force in the contemporary art world beyond her connection to Dante. She curated shows that challenged traditional boundaries, brought attention to artists who had been overlooked, and created a space where art and community intersected. Dante was her silent partner financially but always deferred to Elena's expertise and vision, proud of what she built independently. Their life found a rhythm, mornings working separately on their respective projects, afternoons sometimes overlapping when Dante wanted Elena's opinion on an acquisition or Elena needed Dante's business acumen for gallery operations, evenings spent together in comfortable domesticity that neither had experienced before. They cooked together, read together, discussed politics and philosophy in the mundane details of their days. They traveled frequently, combining business with pleasure, visiting art fairs in Basel and Miami, attending auctions in London and New York. Approximately 18 months into their marriage, on a crisp autumn morning, Elena discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, noticed the subtle changes in her body, but the positive test still filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She had always wanted children someday, but someday had felt distant and theoretical. Now it was immediate and real, bringing questions about how to raise a child in Dante's world, how to provide safety and normalcy when their life was anything but normal. Elena told Dante that evening in the library where they had first acknowledged their feelings for each other. She simply handed him the positive pregnancy test and watched his face transform through a series of emotions: shock, joy, and finally the same terror she felt. He pulled her into his arms and held her for a long moment before speaking. "We are going to have a baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "Are you happy?" Elena asked, needing confirmation. "Terrified and happy," Dante admitted. "I am afraid my past will endanger our child, that I have not made enough changes fast enough. But I am also happier than I have ever been, Elena. You have given me everything: love, purpose, and now this. We will protect this child together. We will give them everything we did not have." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Dante became comically overprotective. He insisted Elena reduce her hours at the gallery, hired additional security specifically for her protection, and consulted with the city's best obstetricians to ensure she received premier care. Elena tolerated his hovering with amused patience, understanding that his fear came from love rather than control. She continued working at Moretti House through her second trimester, only stepping back when the physical demands became too much. Isabella Salvatore was ecstatic about becoming a grandmother again. She visited weekly, bringing family baby clothes passed down through generations, sharing stories of raising Dante and Nico, preparing Elena for the reality of motherhood. The bond between Elena and her mother-in-law deepened during those months, built on shared experience and genuine affection. Isabella confided that she had prayed for years that Dante would find someone who saw past his defenses to the good man underneath, that Elena was an answered prayer. Nico was equally thrilled, already joking about teaching his niece or nephew the family business, by which he meant legitimate business operations rather than anything nefarious. He took his role as uncle seriously, helping Dante prepare the nursery, offering advice from his own experience with friends' children, promising to be present for every important milestone. As Elena's due date approached, Dante's anxiety increased proportionally. He attended every prenatal appointment, asked countless questions, read books about childbirth and infant care with the same focus he brought to business strategies. The night Elena went into labor 2 weeks before her due date, he nearly fainted. She had been reading in bed when her water broke, soaking the expensive Egyptian cotton sheets neither of them cared about in that moment. "It is time," Elena said calmly, though her hands shook slightly. Dante, who had remained composed during gunfights and tense negotiations with dangerous men, went pale. He fumbled for his phone, called her doctor, and then helped Elena dress and get to the car with such nervous energy that she could not help but laugh despite the contractions beginning to intensify. The labor lasted 14 hours, long enough for Dante to experience every possible emotion multiple times. He held Elena's hand, whispered encouragement in Italian and English, wiped her forehead with cool cloths, and looked like he wanted to physically fight the pain on her behalf. Elena drew strength from his presence, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together as they had faced everything else. Their daughter arrived in the early hours of the morning, small and perfect and already possessing Dante's dark hair. The medical team placed her on Elena's chest, and both parents simply stared in wonder at the tiny human they had created. She had Elena's eyes, already alert and curious, examining her new world with focused intensity. 10 perfect fingers, 10 perfect toes, and a set of lungs that announced her arrival with impressive volume. Aurora Isabel Salvatore, Dante said softly, speaking their daughter's name for the first time, the name they had chosen weeks ago. Aurora for the dawn, the new beginning she represented. Isabel for Dante's mother, honoring the woman who had shown them both what maternal strength looked like. Elena cradled their daughter against her chest, tears streaming down her exhausted face, feeling a love so fierce and immediate it took her breath away. Dante kissed Elena's forehead, then gently touched Aurora's tiny hand, marveling when her fingers instinctively curled around his much larger one. In that moment, everything he had built, every decision he had made, every battle he had fought, crystallized into purpose. This child, this family was what everything had been for. Isabella arrived at the hospital within the hour, having waited anxiously in the family lounge throughout the labor. She wept openly when she held her granddaughter for the first time, speaking to Aurora in rapid Italian, welcoming her to the family and promising her all the love and protection the Salvatore name could provide. Nico appeared shortly after, bringing flowers and looking uncharacteristically emotional as he gazed at his niece through the nursery window. The first weeks of Aurora's life transformed the Salvatore estate into something it had never been. A true family home filled with the sounds of infant cries, lullabies sung in the middle of the night, and the quiet conversations of new parents figuring out this terrifying, wonderful responsibility. Dante proved to be a surprisingly natural father despite his fears. He changed diapers with the same precision he brought to business negotiations, walked the floors at 3 a.m. singing Italian folk songs his mother had taught him, and stared at Aurora with such adoration that Elena would sometimes find him simply watching their daughter sleep, wonder written across his face. Elena navigated new motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else. She struggled with exhaustion and the overwhelming responsibility of caring for a tiny human, but she also discovered reserves of strength she had not known she possessed. The gallery continued operating under her assistant director's capable management, allowing Elena to focus on Aurora during these crucial early months. She found that her curatorial eye for detail translated well to noticing every small change in Aurora's development, documenting milestones with the same care she once documented Renaissance paintings. Aurora was an alert baby, her dark eyes taking in everything around her with focused intensity that reminded everyone of Dante. She had Elena's delicate features and olive complexion, creating a perfect blend of both parents. As weeks turned into months, her personality emerged, determined, curious, and already demonstrating the kind of will that suggested she would be a force to reckon with when she grew older. Dante's commitment to transforming the family business intensified after Aurora's birth. He worked tirelessly to ensure that by the time his daughter was old enough to understand what her father did, she would know him as a legitimate businessman and philanthropist rather than anything connected to criminal enterprise. The Salvatore Foundation launched officially when Aurora was 6 months old, with Isabella serving as the founding board president and Elena as the artistic director. The foundation funded arts programs in underserved schools, provided scholarships for students pursuing careers in creative fields, and established a shelter and support network for domestic violence survivors. The transition was not without its cost. Some of the old guard within the organization resented the changes, viewing them as abandonment of tradition. There were tense meetings, heated arguments about loyalty and legacy, and occasionally threats from those who felt betrayed by Dante's reforms. But Dante remained firm, supported by Nico's unwavering loyalty and the younger generation who saw opportunity in legitimate operations rather than the constant danger of criminal enterprise. One evening when Aurora was 8 months old, crawling enthusiastically across the library floor while Elena worked on gallery correspondence and Dante reviewed foundation proposals, he looked up from his paperwork and simply watched his family. Elena sat cross-legged on the carpet, one hand on her laptop while the other kept Aurora from pulling books off the lower shelves, her dark hair falling across her face as she concentrated. Aurora babbled happily to herself, examining a cloth book with intense focus, occasionally looking to her parents for approval of her discoveries. "What are you thinking?" Elena asked, noticing Dante's gaze. "That I never imagined this," Dante admitted. "A family. Real happiness. I thought those things were for other people, that men like me were destined for isolation. You proved me wrong about everything, Elena." You and Aurora have given me a life I did not know was possible. Elena smiled, her eyes soft. You gave me safety when I needed it most. You showed me that strength and gentleness could exist in the same person. You built this life with me, Dante. It belongs to both of us. Later, after Aurora had been tucked into bed with multiple stories and several glasses of water that were clearly delaying tactics, Elena and Dante returned to their own bedroom. They had redecorated since Aurora's birth, transforming the space into a true sanctuary that reflected both their tastes. Renaissance prints hung beside modern photography, comfortable furniture invited relaxation, and the view from their windows overlooked the gardens they had walked through on their first morning as husband and wife. Dante poured 2 glasses of wine, the same vintage they had drunk on their wedding night, saved specifically for their anniversary. They sat together on the balcony overlooking the estate, the spring night warm and filled with the scent of blooming jasmine. I have been thinking, Dante said, about that night at the Bellevue Hotel. If you had not hidden in my closet, if I had not been in that particular suite at that particular time, our lives would be completely different. It was chance, pure luck, that brought us together. I don't believe in pure luck, Elena replied thoughtfully. I think the universe puts people in each other's paths when they need each other most. I needed protection and a fresh start. You needed someone to remind you that life could be more than duty and control. We found each other at exactly the right moment. Do you ever regret it? Dante asked. Taking the job, marrying me, entering this complicated world? Elena turned to face him fully, her expression serious. Never. Not for a single moment. You gave me everything, Dante. Safety, love, partnership, and our beautiful daughter. You showed me what healthy love looks like, what it means to be truly seen and valued. I would hide in 1,000 closets if it meant finding you again. They kissed then, with a passion and tenderness that 5 years of marriage had only deepened, their connection as strong as that first moment in the closet when their eyes had met and something fundamental had shifted in both their lives. The story of Elena and Dante Salvatore became legendary in their circles, told and retold at family gatherings and social events. The curator who hid in a closet and the Mafia boss who protected her instead of turning her away. The unlikely romance that transformed both their lives and an entire criminal empire. The love that proved strong enough to overcome fear, danger, and the weight of family legacy. 10 years after that fateful night at the Bellevue Hotel, Elena and Dante returned to room 1408, now permanently reserved for them by the hotel's management as a gesture of respect for everything the Salvatore family had contributed to the city's cultural life. They stood before the same closet where Elena had hidden, where their story had truly begun. The closet remained unchanged, still filled with expensive suits, though they now belonged to the suite's permanent reservation rather than Dante's personal wardrobe. Elena opened the door and stepped inside, just as she had that terrifying night, though now she was smiling rather than crying. It seemed so much bigger when I was hiding here, she said, running her hand along the wall. I was so terrified. I thought Marcus would find me, or that you would call security and have me arrested. Dante joined her in the closet, closing the door behind them so they stood together in the intimate darkness. I almost did call security. Then I saw your face, the genuine fear and determination, and something stopped me. I have made thousands of decisions in my life, Elena, but opening this closet door and choosing to help you was the best one. Best decision I ever made was hiding in it, Elena replied, echoing the words she had spoken years ago on their anniversary. They emerged from the closet hand in hand, returning to the suite's living area where memories seemed to linger in every corner. The sofa where Elena had poured out her story. The windows where Dante had stood contemplating the offer he would make. The bedroom where Elena had spent that first night in safety, beginning to believe in the possibility of escape and freedom. We should go, Dante said, checking his watch. Aurora's recital starts in 2 hours and she made us promise we would be early. Their daughter, now 10 years old, had inherited Elena's artistic talent and Dante's focused determination. She studied classical ballet with the same intensity she brought to everything, already demonstrating potential that her instructors said was exceptional. Tonight's recital was an important one, showcasing the advanced students in a performance of original choreography. Aurora had been rehearsing for months, and her excitement had been building for weeks. As they left the Bellevue Hotel and drove back to the estate to collect Aurora and Isabella, who would accompany them to the recital, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From terrified woman hiding in a closet to confident gallery owner and mother. From isolated Mafia boss to devoted husband and father working to build a legitimate legacy. From 2 broken people seeking safety to a family built on love, trust, and shared purpose. The theater was filled with proud parents and excited children when they arrived. Aurora spotted them from backstage and waved enthusiastically, her small face alight with joy. Elena waved back, her heart full, and felt Dante's arms settle around her shoulders, solid and reassuring as always. The performance was beautiful. Aurora danced with grace beyond her years, her movements precise and expressive, telling stories through her body in the same way Elena told stories through curating art. When the final curtain fell and Aurora took her bow, both her parents stood and applauded, their pride evident to everyone watching. Afterward, as Aurora chattered excitedly about the performance, still wearing her costume and clutching the bouquet of flowers Dante had brought for her, the family stopped for ice cream at Aurora's favorite shop. It was a tradition they had established years ago, celebrating victories large and small with frozen treats and conversation. "Did you see me during the solo?" Aurora asked, bouncing in her seat despite the late hour. "I almost missed the turn, but I remembered what Madame Svetlana taught me about spotting." "You were perfect," Elena assured her. "Every movement was exactly right." "You were better than perfect," Dante added. "You made the dance look effortless, which means you have truly mastered the technique." Aurora beamed at the praise, then turned thoughtful. "Mama, Dada, tell me again about how you met. The real story." Elena and Dante exchanged glances. They had told Aurora an age-appropriate version before, leaving out the darker details of Marcus's abuse and the danger of that night. But she was getting older, more perceptive, asking questions that deserved honest answers. "I was in trouble," Elena began carefully. "Someone I used to know was trying to control me and I was scared. I ran away and hid in your father's hotel room, in his closet specifically, because I did not know where else to go. And Dada found you," Aurora said, familiar with this part. "I did," Dante confirmed. "I could have been angry or called for help to remove her. Instead, I saw that your mother needed protection and I decided to provide it. Sometimes the best decisions we make are the ones where we choose kindness even when we do not have to." Later, after Aurora had been tucked into bed with multiple stories and several glasses of water that were clearly delaying tactics, Elena and Dante returned to their own bedroom. They had redecorated since Aurora's birth, transforming the space into a true sanctuary that reflected both their tastes. Renaissance prints hung beside modern photography, comfortable furniture invited relaxation, and the view from their windows overlooked the gardens they had walked through on their first morning as husband and wife. Dante poured 2 glasses of wine, the same vintage they had drunk on their wedding night, saved specifically for their anniversary. They sat together on the balcony overlooking the estate, the spring night warm and filled with the scent of blooming jasmine. "I have been thinking," Dante said, "about that night at the Bellevue Hotel. If you had not hidden in my closet, if I had not been in that particular suite at that particular time, our lives would be completely different. It was chance, pure luck, that brought us together." "I don't believe in pure luck," Elena replied thoughtfully. "I think the universe puts people in each other's paths when they need each other most. I needed protection and a fresh start. You needed someone to remind you that life could be more than duty and control. We found each other at exactly the right moment." "Do you ever regret it?" Dante asked. "Taking the job, marrying me, entering this complicated world?" Elena turned to face him fully, her expression serious. "Never. Not for a single moment. You gave me everything, Dante. Safety, love, partnership, and our beautiful daughter. You showed me what healthy love looks like, what it means to be truly seen and valued. I would hide in 1,000 closets if it meant finding you again." They kissed then, with a passion and tenderness that 5 years of marriage had only deepened, their connection as strong as that first moment in the closet when their eyes had met and something fundamental had shifted in both their lives. The story of Elena and Dante Salvatore became legendary in their circles, told and retold at family gatherings and social events. The curator who hid in a closet and the mafia boss who protected her instead of turning her away. The unlikely romance that transformed both their lives and an entire criminal empire. The love that proved strong enough to overcome fear, danger, and the weight of family legacy. 10 years after that fateful night at the Bellevue Hotel, Elena and Dante returned to room 1408, now permanently reserved for them by the hotel's management as a gesture of respect for everything the Salvatore family had contributed to the city's cultural life. They stood before the same closet where Elena had hidden, where their story had truly begun. The closet remained unchanged, still filled with expensive suits, though they now belonged to the suite's permanent reservation rather than Dante's personal wardrobe. Elena opened the door and stepped inside, just as she had that terrifying night, though now she was smiling rather than crying. "It seemed so much bigger when I was hiding here," she said, running her hand along the wall. I was so terrified. I thought Marcus would find me, or that you would call security and have me arrested. Dante joined her in the closet, closing the door behind them so they stood together in the intimate darkness. I almost did call security. Then I saw your face, the genuine fear and determination, and something stopped me. I have made thousands of decisions in my life, Elena, but opening this closet door and choosing to help you was the best one. Best decision I ever made was hiding in it, Elena replied, echoing the words she had spoken years ago on their anniversary. They emerged from the closet hand in hand, returning to the suite's living area where memories seemed to linger in every corner. The sofa where Elena had poured out her story. The windows where Dante had stood contemplating the offer he would make. The bedroom where Elena had spent that first night in safety, beginning to believe in the possibility of escape and freedom. We should go, Dante said, checking his watch. Aurora's recital starts in 2 hours and she made us promise we would be early. Their daughter, now 10 years old, had inherited Elena's artistic talent and Dante's focused determination. She studied classical ballet with the same intensity she brought to everything, already demonstrating potential that her instructors said was exceptional. Tonight's recital was an important one, showcasing the advanced students in a performance of original choreography. Aurora had been rehearsing for months, and her excitement had been building for weeks. As they left the Bellevue Hotel and drove back to the estate to collect Aurora and Isabella, who would accompany them to the recital, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From terrified woman hiding in a closet to confident gallery owner and mother. From isolated mafia boss to devoted husband and father working to build a legitimate legacy. From two broken people seeking safety to a family built on love, trust, and shared purpose. The theater was filled with proud parents and excited children when they arrived. Aurora spotted them from backstage and waved enthusiastically, her small face alight with joy. Elena waved back, her heart full, and felt Dante's arms settle around her shoulders, solid and reassuring as always. The performance was beautiful. Aurora danced with grace beyond her years, her movements precise and expressive, telling stories through her body in the same way Elena told stories through curating art. When the final curtain fell and Aurora took her bow, both her parents stood and applauded, their pride evident to everyone watching. Afterward, as Aurora chattered excitedly about the performance, still wearing her costume and clutching the bouquet of flowers Dante had brought for her, the family stopped for ice cream at Aurora's favorite shop. It was a tradition they had established years ago, celebrating victories large and small with frozen treats and conversation. Did you see me during the solo? Aurora asked, bouncing in her seat despite the late hour. I almost missed the turn, but I remembered what Madame Svetlana taught me about spotting. You were perfect, Elena assured her. Every movement was exactly right. You were better than perfect, Dante added. You made the dance look effortless, which means you have truly mastered the technique. Aurora beamed at the praise, then turned thoughtful. Mama, Dada, tell me again about how you met. The real story. Elena and Dante exchanged glances. They had told Aurora an age-appropriate version before, leaving out the darker details of Marcus's abuse and the danger of that night. But she was getting older, more perceptive, asking questions that deserved honest answers. I was in trouble, Elena began carefully. Someone I used to know was trying to control me and I was scared. I ran away and hid in your father's hotel room, in his closet specifically, because I did not know where else to go. And Dada found you, Aurora said, familiar with this part. I did, Dante confirmed. I could have been angry or called for help to remove her. Instead, I saw that your mother needed protection and I decided to provide it. Sometimes the best decisions we make are the ones where we choose kindness even when we do not have to. Like when I shared my paints with the new girl at school even though I did not know if she would be nice? Aurora asked, drawing connections. Exactly like that, Elena said, her heart swelling with pride at her daughter's compassion. Small acts of kindness can change everything. Your father's kindness changed my entire life. And Mama's courage changed mine, Dante added. She could have given up, accepted a bad situation. Instead, she fought for something better. That takes real bravery. Aurora absorbed this, her young mind processing the lessons embedded in her parents' story. I want to be brave like Mama and kind like Dada, she declared. You already are, both parents said simultaneously, then laughed at the synchronization. The family returned to the estate as midnight approached, Aurora falling asleep in the car despite her earlier excitement. Dante carried her upstairs while Elena followed, and together they got their daughter ready for bed without fully waking her, a practiced routine they had perfected over the years. Tucked under her covers, Aurora mumbled something about dancing and ice cream before settling into deep sleep. In their own bedroom, Elena and Dante prepared for bed with the comfortable familiarity of a long-married couple. As they lay together in the darkness, Dante pulled Elena close, her head resting on his chest, his hand stroking her hair in a gesture that had become their nightly ritual. "Do you remember what I said to you that first morning?" Dante asked quietly. "About making decisions quickly, trusting my instincts?" "I remember everything from those first days," Elena replied. "Every conversation, every gesture. They are burned into my memory." "My instincts told me you were exactly what I needed," Dante continued. "I did not know then how right those instincts were. You did not just become my curator or even my wife. You became my conscience, my anchor, my reason for being better. Everything good in my life traces back to the moment I opened that closet door. And everything good in my life traces back to the moment I was brave enough to hide there," Elena said softly. "We saved each other, Dante. That is what real love does. It does not require one person to rescue the other. It creates partnership where both people become stronger together." They fell asleep in each other's arms as they had every night for over a decade, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built a love story that defied every expectation. The former Mafia boss and the curator who had hidden in his closet. The man who had learned to choose love over power and the woman who had chosen courage over fear. Together they had created something neither could have built alone. A family, a legacy, and a love that would endure. Years would continue to pass, bringing new challenges and joys. Aurora would grow into a remarkable young woman, inheriting her mother's artistic vision and her father's strategic mind, choosing to merge both by becoming an architect who designed museums and cultural centers. The Salvatore Foundation would expand internationally, touching lives across continents, establishing the family name as synonymous with artistic patronage and social good. Moretti House would become one of the world's most prestigious gallery brands, launching careers and shaping contemporary art discourse. But the foundation of everything would remain that night in a closet, when a terrified woman and a dangerous man made choices that changed both their lives forever. When kindness met courage and created the possibility of transformation. When two broken people discovered they could heal each other and build something beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. That was their story. That was their legacy. And it all began with a closet, a stranger's room, and the courage to ask for help from the most unlikely source.